Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're going to be continuing a list. This is top 10 more board games that I don't want to live in. So back a couple weeks ago, I did a collaboration with Dan from Chairman of the Board here on this channel. There'll be a link to that video in the description where he and I covered our top 5 board games that we don't want to live in. So for the end of this list, go check that one out, and that will list our 5 to 1. But here I want to talk about my 15 through 6. So these are 10 more board games that I really don't want to live in because, hey, there are just a lot of these, and I think these would be really fun to talk about. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, quick thing before we start, I do want to mention one caveat. There are no IP games here, so there's nothing that is, an existing property. That I'll probably save for another list. Now, with that being said, let's jump into my number 15, Nemesis, the board game. So Nemesis here basically has you waking up as a crew member of this gigantic spaceship, but something has gone wrong. One of your crew members is dead, and you could be next. Something is happening on the ship. Now, a couple of things for this game. You are kind of playing a semi-cooperative game with everybody else at the table. You have your own personal objective that you have to do to win, but you could potentially team up with everybody else in order to help you complete those objectives. So it's all about kind of knowing what your opponents are doing, and man, my favorite part of this game has to be just the thematic nature of it. It tells a huge story, and it does so in familiar ways with mechanics that make sense and just a great overarching story. So fantastic here. Now, Nemesis, though, the reason I don't want to live here is because it's frankly terrifying. So first off, there's something wrong in space. Now, space, you're stuck. There's really nothing you can do. It's up to your ingenuity, and you have to be able to survive, and sometimes survive for many, many years. So whether that be getting into cryo sleep, figuring out a way to get into escape pod and leave the place, but once you're in one of those, you really don't have a lot of control. It is just a scary setting to have something go wrong in. So very terrifying. That's the first reason. Now, the second reason here is you can't trust anybody. You can't trust the crew members. Maybe they're working for the corporation and they don't really care about your life. That could totally be a thing. So absolutely terrifying. Not a big fan of that. And then the last thing is the intruders themselves. So these aliens are disgustingly huge. So you have these gigantic creatures here that are basically here to eat you and kill you and hopefully, plant their babies into you. This is very similar to Aliens, the board game, but it's its own world, and I think this is really well done, and it really incites that terror. So that's my number 15, Nemesis. Do not want to be there. And my number 14 goes to the game Raise Your Goblets. Now, Raise Your Goblets has you playing a lineage of families. Every 50 or 60 years or so, they send some of your family members to this giant feast, and your whole goal at this feast is to poison your enemies. Now, in the start of the game, you'll reveal these cards that show who you're poisoning, and you'll also get a special ability here that allows you to manipulate the game. Now, that's my favorite part of this game, is that manipulation, because some of them just opt for one-off effects, but ultimately you're trying to manipulate these goblets in front of you, and you'll be dropping these droplets in that could be poison or wine, antidote, what have you. So really cool. I really like the manipulation of the cups here. Now, the reason I want to live in here is because you are willingly going to this meeting to poison each other. And that just sounds awful. It's one of those things where it's like, you've been nominated. Congratulations, you get to go to the feast to die. And that just sounds awful. And I think it's really funny that this is just like a casual thing. Everybody does this. Yeah, we're going to go kill people at this place. That's terrifying. So not a big fan of this. Don't want to be invited to this, but I'll happily play a game about it. That's my number 14, Raise Your Goblets. Now, my number 13 is going to go to the game Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. In this one, you play as a detective in a Hong Kong police force, and one of your fellow police officers has killed somebody, and it's up to you to determine who that is. Now, you do this with the help of a forensic scientist who's going to be giving you clues, the scene of the crime, how they died, weather, all sorts of things like this, and they're trying to help you relate the murder weapon as well as evidence found at the scene. So you have a couple of things to kind of keep aware of as you play, and I think that my favorite part of this game has to be the evidence system itself. I think that's so cool how the murderer has control over which of the items they use to kill, but everybody has potential items that they had on them at that time. And I think that's super cool how everyone has suspicion and there's actual things to base evidence on and guesses on. It's not just, oh, I think you're the murderer. This is great. I love this system here. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is a fantastic game. Now, the reason I don't want to live here is, first off, if you only get one guess in this game to determine who the correct person is, and if you miss, yeah, that's your job. You're tossing your badge on this. And so if you miss, you're out of a job. And that's terrible. So I just thinking about my professional career, if I had like one moment that, could make or break my career, but that was like the epitome of my career. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? Like, oh yeah, you get to do this one thing, and if you mess up this one thing, you were out of a job forever. So that's terrifying to me. That's something that I don't want to deal with. Like, just that career-inducing stress, that's terrible. Obviously, you could do a lot of things at your jobs to lose it immediately, but seeing as this is like that point of your career, you've had like years of study to become this detective, oh, that just seems very stressful. The other thing is, it's your coworker that is the one who's the murderer. That's terrifying. It could be your best friend. It could be somebody that's just sitting right next to you. That's a terrifying situation to be in, that untrustworthiness. And you'll see that in a lot of these games. Nemesis, can't trust anybody. This one, can't trust anybody. So terrifying. That's my number 13, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Now, my number 12 goes to the game Pandemic. Now, this one should be very straightforward. In Pandemic, you are a team of scientists that are trying to stop these outbreaks of pandemics and hopefully find the cures to all four before the game is over and before the world is totally infected. Now, the reason this one, once again, should be very obvious, we've lived through a pandemic. This is not an ideal experience, but the reason that this one is on this list is because there are 4 pandemics. There are 4 separate diseases, ravaging the world at the same time, and that is terrifying. And my dad talked about this to me. He's a doctor, and one of his greatest fears is the fact that this might be a situation that occurs. And he won't play this game because it makes him uncomfortable. And that's totally fair, but I think that's a very real fear to have, the fact that we might be in a position where there are multiple viruses infecting us, and I don't want to subjugate anybody to that, because this is not just you, it's the entire world. It's this entire situation, and that just sounds terrifying. Yes, it would be amazing to come together and defeat all this stuff, but as you know, in pandemics, sometimes that's just not the case. Sometimes you lose, and that seems like a lot of pressure and something that I personally am not comfortable and don't really want to be in. I'll leave it to the experts who are, insanely good at dealing with this virology, and wish them the best. So do not want to be in this situation. And I forgot to mention, my favorite part of Pandemic has to be the system for replicating the diseases. I think that's so well done. Whenever you play diseases on the board, you'll get to a spot where you have to reshuffle them, and you only reshuffle the cards you've actually used, and they go back on the top of the deck. And I think that's so well done because it's a controlled randomness, so you know where potential cities could be infected, so you kind of weigh your risks and your decisions going on in the future. I think that's super well done. So that is my number 12, Pandemic. My number 11 goes to Ultimate Werewolf Deluxe Edition. Ultimate Werewolf is a game, another social deduction game, but this one is a lot longer. And it has you playing as a group of villagers in a little town, and you know that there are a couple of werewolves among you. Now, right off the bat, that's a terrifying setting to be in. You're in this rural village, you've got this monster that you know exists and is killing people, but the thing that's the kicker for me here is the fact that, once again, you cannot trust anybody, and the people around you may kill you just for no reason, and that is terrifying. Now, my favorite mechanic in this game has to be the abilities of the different characters. I love that each character has some type of information. Unless you're a villager, they don't have any special things, but I love that maybe you can see a special card, or you might have an alternate win condition. I like that. I think that's really cool. It allows you to kind of pretend to be somebody, and that incites something interesting, and I think that's cool. But in this one in particular, a lot of the times you might just get called a murderer because of the way you're talking, the way you're acting, and that's awful. This is a game where you're going to have constant paranoia, and if you were in this world, you would have even more paranoia, more anxiety, the fact that if you step out of line a little bit, you might be sent to the gallows. Or if you don't step out of line, if you're acting too good, you might be sent to the gallows. What? This is terrifying to be in a situation like this. And on top of that, if the townsfolk don't kill you, the werewolves could. Maybe you are doing too good. Maybe you're on the right track. You might be killed just for that. And I think that's terrifying. So waiting, the length of this game and the length of the nights, this happens for days and days and days. Every night somebody dies because of the werewolves. That's terrifying to me because you are in constant fear for a long extended period of time that you are just going to die. So very scary. That's my number 11, Ultimate Werewolf. Oh boy. My number 10 is going to be the game Zombicide Black Plague. Now, Zombicide Black Plague is one of the renditions of Zombicide, but this sets you back in the medieval ages during the Black Plague. But instead of just killing people, this would turn them into zombies. So right off the bat, that's a terrifying theme. Now, my favorite part of Zombicide here is the camaraderie and the cooperation. I love how your actions are quick and you are constantly talking to people about what best to do, what strategies to take, and what risks are you wanting to take in this game. So I really like the camaraderie in this game and how you have that team and you're focusing on that mission. I really like that. I also love all the dice chucking. It's just fun to go around and slay monsters. This is one that my wife and I play a lot. We play the 2nd edition, and we just really enjoy just kind of, after a long, stressful day, it's good to just go slay some zombies, get rid of some of that pure evil. Now, that being said, this would actually be a terrible time to live in. Now, first off, zombies. I'm just going to go and say that. It's terrifying. And secondly, this is a plague. This is an actual thing that is going on. You could be infected not just from a bite of a zombie, but potentially from a rat. Something that could just grab you and turn you into something awful. So not a big fan of this. Absolutely terrified. And could you imagine that one day you just wake up and, uh-oh, you found a small little rat, or heck, maybe you found a big rat, and now you're infected, and boom, you're dead. Terrifying. Now, also, in addition, this is medieval ages, so, it wasn't that good healthcare-wise. Your lifespan wasn't going to be that long, so even if you did survive, probably wouldn't be for very long. And this would be a constant, you'd have constant fear in this game, where you are having to constantly run from place to place, you're constantly having to scavenge to survive, and there's really no structure in here to help you out in your dire situation. So this one, to me, just seems absolutely terrifying. Not only do you have that mixture of the disease plus the zombies themselves, but you also just have the setting, the medieval ages. You have not as advanced weapons here. Now, to be fair, this game does introduce magic, so you may have that to combat things, but once again, this is me going back in that time. I don't know if I'd be able to wield that magic very well. So there's lots of things to consider here, but not one that I would like to find myself in. Any zombicide, no thank you, please. But that is number 10, Zombicide Black Plague. Now, number 9 is going to go to the game Nyctophobia. And Nyctophobia, Fear of the Dark. And this game has you playing as kind of a stereotypical horror character, whether it be the cheerleader or the jock or the nerd. Your job is to work together to get to a car and get out because there is a murderer or somebody coming after you, whether it be a vampire or a psycho or the axe murderer. You need to get out and leave. Now, the reason that this one is so high is, first off, it is completely dark. In this game, you play blind. You're going to be wearing these glasses that make it so you can't see. Now, that being said, there's nothing more scary than being chased by something that's going to kill you if you can't see it. If you don't know where it's going and you don't know where you're going. You don't have a plan. You can't use your surroundings. And Zombicide, yeah, there's all these terrible things coming after you, but you have your camaraderie, you have your team, you know what you have your weapons or resources. In this one, you got maybe a couple rocks. You could talk to people out loud, but that, if you are in this situation, that might give away your position to the murderer. And ultimately, the murderer is just kind of playing with you here, and it's pretty terrifying. So in this one in particular, absolutely terrifying. I don't want to be caught in a situation where I have little control to, protect myself and my friends, and this is bad. So that is my number 9, Nyctophobia. Now, my number 8, very different style of game. This is Pooh the card game. In Pooh the card game, you play as a monkey, and it's your job to smother your enemies in poop and eventually cover them so completely that they're out of the game. So if you do that and you are the last one alive, you win the game. Now, you're going to be washing off this poop with like shower cards. You have special abilities that you can use to each other. This is take that to the extreme, where you're going to be throwing all sorts of different poop. Now, the reason this is on this list, first off, you're a monkey. Second off, you are literally throwing poop at each other until you cover somebody in a mountain of poop. Just think about that for a second. Is that something you really want to do? Do you throw poop? Be covered in poop? Yes, you get some break, you get some, some relief, some sweet sanctuary by washing it off, but you know what's going to happen? You just wash yourself off. You're going to get covered in poop. And now you're wet and you're covered in poop, even more poop. This is bad. Don't do this. You don't want to be in this situation. Save yourself, get out alive, stay away from the world of Pooh, the card game. So that's my number 8, Pooh, the card game. My number 7 is going to be the game Seventh Continent. So Seventh Continent here has you playing as a survivor on an island in the Seventh Continent. And you wake up with some type of curse, and this curse is going to direct you. Now, I'm not going to show any spoilers here. These are just the curses that you may select. And based on the curse you pick, it's going to give you some type of clue. Now here's the twist. A lot of times, these clues are extremely vague, extremely abstract, and you might not have any idea what they're talking about. So what do you got to do? You got to wander. And that's this game as a whole. wandering and trying to figure out what you're going to do. So my favorite part of this game actually has to be the simple action system. I love that when you do something, it's pretty much the same thing. Every action is the same, but the type can be modified based on the items you have. So I really like that it's very simple to do things in the game. And you're going to do it with this action deck, and you're trying to go for a number of successes, so you have a bit of push your luck every time you take an action. So I really enjoy that. The things that I don't enjoy in this game are also the reasons I would hate to be on this island, is a lot of the time you're just kind of walking around hoping that you find things, especially with some of the earlier quests where you're not really familiar with the island. That's a lot of fun. I really like that initial exploration, but ultimately I have no idea what's going on with some of these curses. And to be alone on an island and to have to just sit there like dealing with your own personal madness and trying your best to survive with like creatures and dangers, that sounds incredibly awful. The fun of camping for me is the people that you bring with you. And this is like camping to the extreme, but you're on this island that, you know, is full of dangers and terror, and I do not want to be involved here. So that is my number 7, Seventh Continent. Now, lastly on this list, my number 6 is Micro Macro Crime City. Now, this was actually one of Dan's picks on his list, so I think that's really fun that we've got a little bit of a crossover here. But Macro Micro Crime City here has you playing as a detective in Macro Micro Crime City. Your whole thing here is you are trying to solve a case by following clues on this Where's Waldo map. So that's my favorite thing about this game, is I love the clues that it gives you. It's kind of progressive. So as opposed to some games where you get all of the questions at the end of the game, you're just trying to find clues beforehand, you actually are given them step by step, and they kind of guide you through the story. So I really like how that's done and how it's kind of a progressive game as opposed to kind of just do the best you can and then check your answers at the end. I really like that. Now, that being said, though, Micro Macro Crime City here, it's literally a crime city. I don't want to be here because people are constantly dying, getting murdered. As you can see, getting stuck up. There's crazy amounts of things. If there's a crime, it's in this game. Yeah, you can literally think of any bit of crime. It's there. As you can see, there's a guy just getting punched out. There's a dude here that just, you know, he went up a ladder here, and he probably killed himself. That's terrifying. There's all sorts of things that can happen in this game. So my recommendation is, if you have a city that's literally called Crime City, you probably want to stay away from it. So that's my number 6, Macro Micro Crime City. And that's the list. Those are 10 more board games that I don't want to live in. The reasons why, and some of the reasons I actually like to play those games. So that's the list. If you want to know my number 5 through 1, please go check out that other list that I did with Dan over at Chairman of the Board. I'll link to his channel as well as our collaboration video down in the description. But what are the things that you don't want to live in? What are the board games that you want to stay away from but you love playing in? I'd love to hear your opinions. Do you agree or disagree with any of my things? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching Side Game Strong.